Hey, George here. Today I'm going to talk about why your first Fujifilm prime lens should be one of the Fujicrons. Now that could be the 23mm f2, the 35mm f2, or the 50mm f2. Now which one I would suggest to be your first one? Well, I'll get to that at the end. Now if you've been doing photography for a while and perhaps you came from a different camera system, you already know what focal length you like and things like that, well then this probably isn't going to be the video for you. However, if you're new to photography, perhaps you just got your first Fujifilm camera, you've been mostly shooting with the kit lens, and now you're thinking about getting a prime lens, well then this is going to be the video for you. Okay, to start off with, what are Fujicrons? Well, the term Fujicron is actually not an official Fujifilm term. It's a term that was given by the Fujifilm community for these sets of lenses. And it came from the Leica Summicron series of lenses, which were really famous lenses back in the day. They're still famous today. Okay, so let's talk about these three lenses. So I got the 23mm, the 35mm, and the 50mm. Now these are the ones that are generally considered to be Fujicrons. Now some people might argue, there are maybe some other lenses that they might bucket into the same category, but generally speaking, when people say Fujicron, they usually mean one of these three lenses. The 23mm, which gives you a full frame equivalent of 35mm, that gives you a pretty, decent wide field of view. So for things that are like environmental portraits and things like that, that's what I would use this for. Like if you're coming from, for example, shooting from iPhones and things like that, you'll be more comfortable with a 23mm just because of the wider focal length. You do get to capture more of the scene. Also, if you're doing like family pictures and stuff like that, and you want to be able to capture, full body shots with the environment, then this is the lens that I typically would use for that purpose. Now, for more street photography stuff, I tend to use the 35 more. Now, some people like to use the 23 for street photography, but for me, myself, I like the 35mm. And this gives you a full frame equivalent of 50mm. The reason I like this for street photography is that while you can also still get the environments, you do have to be a little bit further back. When you're on the street, it just means you don't actually have to be as close to your subject when you're trying to, frame them in your composition compared to the 23mm. The 23mm, you actually have to be much closer than the 35 to kind of get the same framing. For the kind of shots I like to do, the 35 tends to work out better for me. Now, if you're trying to use this for like family photography though, like you're trying to take pictures of your kids or your pets or whatever, and you're at a restaurant and things like that, what you will find is that this does feel a little bit tighter. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Like it's actually not as easy to shoot with this if people are really close to you, okay? The 23 is much easier if people are close to you. Okay, so again, like if I just go out with my family, like a very casual, outing, actually I tend to bring the 23. But if I'm gonna go out to do street photography on my own, then I tend to take the 35. Now for the 50mm lens, this gives you a full frame equivalent of 75mm. Now in a way I would say that's maybe slightly awkward just because in the full frame world, the lens that people, or the focal length that people tend to use for portrait photography is 85mm. So this is about 10mm short of that. But this still works as a kind of portrait lens. And it's also very small, right? So if you want to get the 85mm equivalent, you have to get the 56mm lens, which is actually much bigger than this lens. Personally, for myself, it is a little bit tight. I'm not really a telephoto shooter myself, so for street photography, it works for street photography, right? So if you're like, far back, you want to be, on the other side of the street, then this will actually be very good for that. There are a lot of street photographers that use like the 85mm focal length, right? Which is even tighter than this one. If you kind of like that telephoto, look, you want to be much further back, across the street or something like that, then this will actually be even more discreet as a street photography lens. But just keep in mind that it is a much tighter shot. So, but it does give you very nice, background blur and things like that. Just given the focal length and also given the f2. I probably use this lens the least actually, but if I am going out all day, for example, with the 23mm, and I know there might be some shots that I want that's a little bit further away, then I bring this also. Now, if I just bring the 35, I typically don't bring any other lens. I just keep the 35. But this I will bring if I bring the 23. And why would you want to shoot with a Fujicron? Well, they're small, lightweight, and relatively inexpensive. So especially if you don't yet know what focal lengths you truly enjoy, these are a great option just for those reasons given. So for example, if you're in the city and you're doing street photography, being more discreet is often an advantage because your subjects or the people in the environment tend not to notice you as much because, first of all, the lenses are small, so it doesn't really catch attention compared to a zoom lens. And if you're there on the street, zooming in and out, people just notice that, right? And if you are trying to capture a particular subject walking by and they see you there zooming at them, that could create some confrontation, right? Versus if you're just in the corner and, just kind of quietly take the picture, you can get them in their natural state, right? So if you think about street photography, generally you try to capture the moment in the environment. And so you actually don't often want people necessarily to notice you. Now some people's styles, they actually want people to look at the camera, so that could be different, right? But just because the camera is actually smaller, lighter, it's also easier just to walk around with. So that's the other thing. Now, what I found with zoom lenses is that because I'm often there zooming in and out, it is kind of taking me out of the moment for a moment, because I have to think about, what focal lengths I want, and then different scenes, I need to end up zooming it in and out. And I also tend not to walk around as much, right? Because I'm just planted there and I don't have to move to change my framing. Okay, so which of these lenses would I recommend? If I can only pick one lens as my first one, especially assuming if you actually already have one of the kit lenses, I would probably go with the 35. Okay, because if you actually want something wider, well, you have your kit lens, right? You have your kit lens. Your kit lens can do it too. If I'm bringing out all the lenses, right? If I bring out the kit lens and I bring out a prime, well then the prime I want it to be different than what I would get in my kit lens, right? And it has to have some advantages. I can get wider shots with the kit lens, right? So for wide shots, I would probably just use that. But if I'm going to kind of run and gun it and I want something that looks a little bit different, then this is why I would go with a 35. So personally, I prefer the 35. That would be the one I recommend to be your first lens. Now, if you don't have a kit lens, you don't have any lenses at all, okay, and you were going to get a prime as your first lens, your first Fujifilm lens, then I would say to get a 23. Okay, if this is the only lens you have, I would get a 23. But if you already have a kit lens, then I would get a 35. And only when you like, kind of the 75mm full frame equivalent look, then I would say you can consider getting this lens, okay? But if you're like me, you eventually end up getting all three anyways, okay? So a lot of people actually have all three of these lenses. Okay, so that concludes this video. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it useful. Again, these things are subjective. It kind of depends on you and kind of what you like to shoot, but those are my recommendations. And so if you found that useful, if you found that interesting, definitely please give it a like and subscribe. It will help me out a lot. I plan to do a lot more videos like this where I talk about, things that I use, things that I own, and just talk about my experiences. So if those are topics you're interested in, I'd love to have you stick around. So I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.